The White House is accusing China of unfair trade practices regarding semiconductor chips. A filing from the U.S. Trade Representative says this, quote, for decades, China has targeted the semiconductor industry for dominance and has employed increasingly aggressive and sweeping non-market policies and practices in pursuing dominance of the sector. China's pursuit of its dominance goals has severely disadvantaged U.S. companies, workers, and the U.S. economy. But Trump administration is delaying new tariffs on Chinese chips until June of 2027. Now, China responded to the filing and the accusation, slamming the U.S. for abusing tariffs and surpassing China's industries, adding that China will, quote, safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. I want to bring in former World Bank and IFC outside counsel in Beijing, Katie Zachariah. Katie, good morning to you. Your response to kind of this dichotomy of how the U.S. seems to be handling the Chinese. On one instance, we're saying that there are abuses there that need to be addressed. On the other, we're delaying the tariffs till 2027 on chips. Explain that.
Well, it looks like President Trump is trying to very effectively steady the market, steady negotiations with Beijing, allowing companies to onshore and recalibrate the semiconductor industry. And so what he's doing with Xi Jinping is there is this threat in June of 27 of an increased tariff, but there's also this period of time for negotiations and this recalibration. This is on top of President Trump negotiating a very incredible deal with Micron for $200 billion for research and development for our own semiconductor industries in Virginia, Idaho, and New York. And so it looks like this kind of defensive and offensive tactic where Beijing has dominated the market for so long and has enjoyed that, yet it has come at the huge cost of American companies. So President Trump will leverage this and hopefully land a great deal between he and Xi Jinping on the semiconductors.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the video. This is Justin Paul. Today I'm going to be reacting and reviewing a few different news clips about what's new as far as the United States' relationship with China. And from what they're saying here, it looks like the Trump administration is going to halt any tariffs on China's semiconductors until 2027. And the U.S. is basically accusing China as far as using their, semiconductor industry to, kind of halt things going on in the United States as far as, that whole industry going. And as far as that whole industry goes, and we do know semiconductors are used for like making like the chips that are used in a lot of modern electronics. And they and with everything being digital and stuff like that, like they're for like tiny switches, amps for electricity, and devices like smartphones, computers, and TVs, medical equipment, of course AI systems. So semiconductors are like a very integral part in technology. And so we all know that China definitely has a huge industry as far as semiconductor production. And also Trump is looking to bring some of that industry over to the United States to where we can start really mass producing our own semiconductors, which I feel like is a very smart play. But yeah, we're looking to halt any new tariffs on China's semiconductor chips until 2027, trying to bring back some stability into that industry, and make sure companies that are based here in the United States are not at a disadvantage when it comes to trying to obtain semiconductor chips in order to make everything that we pretty much use every day.
We have another issue with China, which I'm going to ask you about, and I'm curious your thoughts as to what this means for the upcoming summit between Xi Jinping and President Trump. So the Pentagon is sounding the alarm in its annual report to Congress on security developments in China. The Department of War wrote this: China's top military strategy focuses squarely on overcoming the U.S. through a whole-of-nation mobilization effort that Beijing terms national total war. China's historic military buildup has made the U.S. homeland increasingly vulnerable. China maintains a large and growing arsenal of nuclear, maritime, conventional, long-range strike, cyber, and space capabilities that are able to directly threaten Americans' security.
Okay, so just in a statement from the Pentagon, they're sounding the alarm on China building up their military and building up their arsenal. And as you see here, they're saying that China maintains a large and growing arsenal of nuclear, maritime, conventional long-range strike, and cyber and space capabilities able to directly threaten the American security. So, cyber, there's always, cyber security threats going on. Um, they can also knock out communications and stuff through different tactics and things like that with satellites in space. Um, of course, we know what nuclear weapons can do. They can destroy whatever they hit. And maritime, meaning like over the water, like Navy and stuff like that. And of course, they're saying, long strike, like missiles to where they don't even have to be super close to the United States and can strike certain targets within the United States. And as we do know, man, with us being the lead superpower in with throughout the world, of course, other countries want that spot. And with anyone who has the top spot, it's always going to be countries who, try to get themselves built up to be able to compete with you. Um, One thing, I do worry about is that, one day we get ourselves into so much of these conflicts that it's just we're spread too thin. So I do think our military, and the Pentagon and our commander in chief and Congress, I do feel like everyone does a great job as far as balancing all that out. But the Pentagon can only thing the Pentagon can do is try to warn us of what's happening in these other countries, because of course we're going to keep our eyes on everything that these countries are doing. Some countries we want to make sure they don't get nowhere near the capacity that we have and nowhere near the numbers that we have, because you know they're not going to have good intentions for us here as Americans. And I have been seeing something as far as China wanting to invade Taiwan. I'm not sure how true that is, but I wouldn't doubt it, being the close proximity that it is, and then just the size of China compared to Taiwan. I definitely would not be shocked.
Wanted to get your take on this because there's a really interesting deep dive of this in the Journal this morning. Can Trump's Navy match China's? And maybe we're talking about the issue with Taiwan, and that's one issue. And I know that the Department of War has also warned that it looks like a strike on Taiwan could be happening. It could be this year, maybe 2027. But you do see the president really moving to at least bring the ships, the U.S. naval ships, into the new age, into the new century, possibly because of the China threat. What do you make of that?
I completely agree. It was no accident that President Trump released the Golden Fleet, the Trump fleet, ahead of this Pentagon report, especially highlighting the naval capabilities of China. China not only has this growing arsenal of maritime, but they're able to blend naval and civil. And China has the capability to manufacture, I think it's at 232 times greater than the United States, warships and civil ships. So President Trump is absolutely correct. In the United States needs to be able to get ahead and start competing with China, because China has not stopped for decades, while the United States has slowed its pace on building up our naval ships and really building up our military. China has doubled, tripled, exponentially increased its military capabilities. So the Pentagon report, especially after living in China for 3 years, It was very concerning to me, and I'm so grateful we have President Trump getting ahead of a lot of this, and I hope and pray that it can be a bipartisan effort from the Democrats and Republicans to really get behind him and develop our military on this, Cheryl.
Well,
Yeah, I agree with everything she just said. We have to take these type of things serious because, as she was saying, they've been building up for decades. You know, and we started to slow our pace a little bit and stuff like that. But we have to make sure that all of our naval ships and um, all of our destroyers, everything that we have is modern, up to date. We definitely have to introduce new ships into the fleet. Um, make sure we keep our numbers growing as far as young people enlisting into the military and going ahead and getting themselves trained for these type of new threats and any type of conflicts that we may get into going forward. We want to make sure that we're prepared and that we don't get caught blindsided or get caught with our pants down.
A new Pentagon report says China is in the midst of a historic military buildup that's made the U.S. homeland increasingly vulnerable. The congressionally mandated assessment describes a Chinese military that is expanding rapidly across nuclear, space, cyber, and conventional domains, even as Washington pursues a more optimistic diplomatic tone with Beijing. The report argues that China's People's Liberation Army has become more sophisticated and resilient with capabilities that can directly threaten America's security.
China's historic military buildup has made the U.S. homeland increasingly vulnerable. China maintains a large and growing arsenal of nuclear, maritime, conventional long-range strike, cyber, and space capabilities able to directly threaten American security.
And one of the most closely watched areas is China's nuclear arsenal. Now, according to the Pentagon, China's stockpile remained in the low 600s through 2024, reflecting a slower pace of warhead production compared to earlier years. The report doesn't spell out, however, the reasons, but links the slowdown to President Xi Jinping's sweeping anti-corruption purge within the PLA, including the rocket force that oversees nuclear weapons. Now, these investigations, it says, may be causing short-term disruptions and uncertainty over readiness.
Xi's anti-corruption campaign, including the firing of 2 PLA rocket force commanders, deputy commanders, chief of staff members, state-owned defense industry seniors, and a top PLA rocket force engineer, all of which have involvement in nuclear weapons, is very likely creating reverberations within China's nuclear forces and may be raising questions among leadership about force readiness.
Despite this, the long-term trend, however, remains clear. China is still carrying out a massive nuclear expansion and is on track to have more than 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. The report also reveals that China has likely loaded over 100 intercontinental ballistic missiles into new silo fields in northern China, strengthening its ability to launch retaliatory strikes after early warning. But beyond its nuclear forces, Taiwan remains at the center of the Pentagon's concerns. The report says that the PLA is moving toward Xi's goal of being able to achieve a strategic, decisive victory over Taiwan as early as 2027.
So, just trying to put a lot of this into perspective. China is definitely building up their capabilities. They're definitely, building up their arsenal, building up their military. Um, they had a, anti-corruption sweep to where, they were getting people out of positions where there was a lot of corruption, and of course they're going to be looking to fill those positions with other people. And as you see here, man, their army spokesman is basically saying that their leader is looking to achieve a strategic, decisive victory over Taiwan. So You know, we all know what's coming, and I'm sure the United States is going to have to be right there with their nose in that whole thing if a conflict does start up. And they're saying China expects to be able to fight and win a war on Taiwan by the end of 2027. So, as long as it's along with everything that's going on with Russia and Ukraine and Venezuela and Nigeria and, Israel and, Iran and all these other conflicts that are still going on. This is a new one that it's been bubbling. China's been preparing, and this is something that we'll definitely have to keep our eyes on. But I'm gonna go ahead and close out this video. Just kind of wanted to bring this to everyone's attention that this is what's going on. As we're being distracted by entertainment and sports and all this and that. This is the real that's actually going on in the world, and what these other countries are up to. Again, while we over here and being distracted by social media influencer relationships, streamer relationships, and all this other stuff that at the end of the day, it doesn't hold any weight compared to going to war and military and stuff like that. So, if you like my content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. This is Justin Paul. Peace.